The desert burned with silence until a lone seal found what no soldier should ever find. The man behind the sniper network was his own father, a ghost from a war that never ended. Trapped between blood and duty, he faced a choice no weapon could solve: destroy his father's creation or lose his soul trying to save him. But when the smoke cleared, something divine waited in the ashes, a miracle no science could explain. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The Afghan heat rose like a living creature, rippling over the valley floor and swallowing every sound. Dust floated in the golden haze, coating the tents, the rifles, and the tired faces of men who hadn't slept for days. At the far edge of the forward operating base, a tattered American flag barely stirred. The silence between gunfire was the cruelest thing. It made hope sound foreign. Lieutenant Jack Turner stood outside the command tent, boots sunk deep in sand, the collar of his combat shirt darkened with sweat. He was 26, tall and broad-shouldered, his face carved by the sun and sleepless nights. A faint scar crossed his right cheek, a memory from his first deployment when shrapnel had grazed him near Fallujah. His brown hair was cut short, military neat, but the day's heat glued strands to his forehead. His eyes, storm gray, sharp and restless, carried the weight of command that no one his age should bear. He lifted his canteen, took a sip, and felt nothing but grit. Around him, Marines and SEALs moved with the exhausted precision of men surviving by habit. A Humvee idled nearby, its engine coughing against the dust. Somewhere in the distance, a rifle cracked, sharp, clean, merciless. The camp froze, then another shot. Closer this time. "Sniper again," muttered Petty Officer Luke Harris, a wiry man in his 30s with a half-grown beard and the kind of humor that only thrived in misery. His uniform was torn at the sleeve, revealing a faded tattoo of an anchor and the word faith. He spat into the sand and adjusted his rifle sling. "That's the third time this morning." Jack didn't answer. His gaze swept toward the ridges that loomed over the valley, jagged, barren, and silent. Somewhere up there, unseen eyes watched every move. For 4 days, those eyes had owned them. He turned toward the tent and stepped inside. The air was thick with diesel fumes and the buzz of the generator. Maps covered the folding tables, each marked with circles and lines. Kill zones, routes, dead men's paths. The smell of sweat, dust, and instant coffee filled the cramped space. Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Bennett stood over the map, her fingers tracing elevation lines. She was in her late 30s, lean and sun-browned, her short auburn hair tucked under a faded boonie hat. Her posture radiated discipline, but her eyes, steady, analytical, betrayed the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many good men bleed for bad hills. Once a high school teacher from Kansas, she had joined the Navy after losing her husband during his second tour. The war had reshaped her kindness into precision. "They've got us pinned from 3 angles," Sarah said quietly, tapping her pen against a ridgeline. "Every time we move a supply team, they fire. We can't get a spotter up there without losing another man." Jack leaned over the table, studying the map. "No thermal hits from last night's drone run?" "Nothing reliable." She replied, "They're using the rocks for cover. Smart, patient, probably trained." He frowned. "Insurgents with sniper discipline. That's not good news." Before she could respond, a shadow moved by the entrance. A low growl followed. a deep, rumbling sound that made everyone glance up. Ranger, Jack's German shepherd, padded into the tent, his tan and black coat dusty from patrol. He was 5 years old, strong and intelligent, with sharp amber eyes that missed nothing. The dog had been with Jack since Bud S. training, his constant partner and the only being who had never questioned an order. Ranger's ears twitched as he scanned the room, alert to tension invisible to human senses. Jack knelt and scratched the dog's neck. "Easy, buddy." The dog's growl faded to a low whine before he sat beside his handler, tail sweeping the floor once. Harris chuckled softly. "Even your mutt's got better instincts than most of us." Jack didn't smile. His hand stayed on Ranger's shoulder. The dog's presence steadied him. A reminder of something loyal, unbroken. "Command says we're to hold position until air support clears the ridges," Sarah said, folding the map. "But that could take days. We're running low on water and morale." Jack straightened, his jaw tightening. "Morale doesn't win firefights, but fear sure as hell loses them." Sarah met his eyes. "You're planning something." He hesitated, then nodded. "If we can't outgun them, we outthink them. I'm taking a recon team out tonight, with Ranger. We'll find where those bastards are hiding." Harris looked up sharply. "You're serious? You walk into that ridge after dark? You're volunteering for a suicide note?" Jack's voice was quiet, but unyielding. "They've taken 3 of our men. I'm not losing another." The tent fell silent. Even the generator's hum seemed to fade. Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. "You always think courage is enough." Jack's lips curved into something close to a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's not courage I trust. It's patterns. Every sniper has one. They think they're ghosts, but ghosts leave footprints." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the dry taste of the mountains. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, the sky turning copper and violet. Jack stepped out of the tent, Ranger close at his heel. The valley stretched before them, beautiful and cruel. He crouched beside Ranger, pointing toward the distant ridge. "You smell that?" he whispered. The dog's ears flicked, nose twitching. Jack could almost feel the tension vibrating through the leash, a shared language built on trust and silence. He thought of his father, a Marine who had died when Jack was 16, killed in an ambush that no one saw coming. The last thing his father had said before leaving for that final deployment still echoed in his head. "A man's strength isn't in his trigger finger, Jack. It's in his patience." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, breathing through the ache. Patience. He hadn't inherited much of it, but he had inherited purpose. Night settled fast in the desert, swallowing the light. The camp went dim except for a few flickering lanterns. In the distance, the ridge loomed like a black wave frozen mid-crash. The men ate in silence, eyes darting to the mountains. Somewhere, a radio crackled with static and then went dead. Jack checked his rifle, his M4 glinting under the lantern's glow. He loaded the chamber, the click echoing softly. Ranger sat beside him, tail motionless, gaze fixed on the darkness. Sarah approached, holding a folded piece of paper. "Mission brief. I signed off on it. If anyone asks, I ordered it." He looked at her, surprised. "You don't have to cover me." "I'm not," she said quietly. "Just making sure you get back to tell the story." He nodded once. "I'll bring you proof, 12 minutes worth." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jack's answer was a thin smile. "That's how long it'll take to end this." As the camp sank into uneasy silence, Jack rose and slung his pack. Ranger followed, muscles tense, ears perked. The moon hadn't risen yet, only a faint shimmer of stars guiding their path. They moved beyond the perimeter wire into the wild hush of the desert. The night wrapped around them like a test. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed louder than gunfire. The valley below was still. Above them, the ridge waited, patient, deadly, watching. Jack whispered almost to himself, "Let's see who outweights who." Ranger's tail twitched once in answer, and together man and dog disappeared into the dark, where the line between courage and recklessness blurred beneath the Afghan stars. The desert night was alive with silence. Wind crawled over the rocks like a restless spirit, carrying whispers of dust and the faint metallic tang of old gunfire. The moon had not yet risen. The world was painted in shades of black and ash. Lieutenant Jack Turner crouched low beside a cluster of boulders, one hand resting on his rifle, the other brushing the rough fur of Ranger. The German shepherd's ears twitched, amber eyes scanning the ridge ahead, body taut with instinct. His breath came out in controlled bursts, steady and quiet, the perfect mirror of his handler. Jack adjusted the NVG strap against his forehead. His pulse was slow, deliberate, a rhythm trained through years of drills and chaos. He had led raids, breaching rooms filled with smoke and blood, but this silence, this waiting, clawed at him in ways gunfire never could. He signaled with 2 fingers, and a shadow shifted to his left. Sergeant Evan Cole moved into position, a compact man with the build of a wrestler and the calm eyes of someone who'd already survived too many close calls. His face was square, framed by a rough jawline and a thin layer of stubble. The left side bore a faded scar that ran from his ear to his neck, a souvenir from an IED blast years ago. He rarely spoke of it, but everyone knew that scar had taken more than skin. It had burned away the reckless humor he once had. Now he was silent, reliable, and utterly precise. "Wind steady. No movement," Cole whispered, voice gravel low. Jack nodded. "We move on my mark." To the right, Corporal Ben Navarro, the youngest of the team, adjusted his scope. At 23, he was a kid among wolves, tall, lean, with olive skin and a restless energy that burned brighter than common sense. His family ran a mechanic shop in Arizona, and sometimes he still smelled faintly of oil and dust. Navarro idolized Jack in the way younger soldiers often did, seeing courage instead of the quiet fear that came with command. Behind them, Chief Petty Officer Martin Graves, the team's communications lead, was hunched over a tablet tracking their GPS coordinates. Graves was in his 40s, solid-built with streaks of silver in his beard and eyes that had seen too much. He'd served in Iraq, Syria, and 6 nameless places no one would ever admit existed. He called himself the Old Man. Though he still moved like he could take on anyone half his age, he was pragmatic to the point of cynicism. But his faith in Jack's instincts ran deep, even if he pretended otherwise. Jack gave the hand signal. The 4 men and the dog began their slow ascent up the rocky slope. Every step was deliberate. Rocks shifted beneath their boots, and the air thinned with altitude. Ranger moved ahead by a few meters, nose close to the ground, tail straight, posture alert. Occasionally he paused, head tilting, and Jack would freeze, trusting the animal's senses more than any sensor or drone. Halfway up, the radio clicked softly. Graves' voice murmured in Jack's earpiece, "Command's checking in. They want a status update." Jack's jaw flexed. "Tell them we're alive. That's the only status that matters." Graves chuckled dryly. "Copy that." They continued upward, the ridge towering over them like a black wall. The stars above were sharp and cold, scattered like shrapnel across the sky. Jack's thoughts drifted, uninvited, to Sarah Bennett, back at base. He could still see her silhouette against the flickering lamplight, her face tight with worry as she handed him the mission brief. There had been something in her eyes, not fear, but a knowing weight. She understood that leadership was a kind of loneliness. A faint sound snapped him back. Ranger had stopped, ears perked. The dog growled low, body angled toward a cluster of rocks 30 yards ahead. Jack dropped to one knee, scanning through his scope. At first, nothing. Then, a shimmer, subtle but real. Heat signature. Someone had been there recently. "Cole," Jack whispered. "Check the left flank. Navarro, cover the ridge line. Graves, mark this coordinate." Cole moved like a ghost, crouched low, rifle ready. Navarro adjusted his aim. Breath held. The wind picked up, carrying sand across the slope. Jack crept closer, eyes narrowing on the disturbed ground. The faint impression of a prone shooter, the outline of a bipod pressed into the dust. A single spent casing glinted faintly. "Confirmed position," he said softly. "They were here no more than an hour ago." Graves exhaled. "So they're watching us watch them." Jack didn't answer. He crouched beside the indentation, gloved fingers brushing the sand. The ground was still warm. His heartbeat quickened. No, they're repositioning. As if on cue, Ranger's growl deepened. The dog's nose lifted toward the east, tail stiff. Jack followed his gaze, and then he saw it. A faint flash from the next ridge, muzzle glint. Instinct screamed. "Down!" he barked. The first shot cracked through the night, missing by inches. Rocks exploded into fragments beside Navarro, who cursed and rolled behind cover. Ranger lunged forward, barking furiously. Another round whistled past, carving a spark off Jack's rifle. "Two shooters!" Cole shouted. "Higher elevation, east side!" "Smoke out!" Jack ordered. Navarro pulled a grenade, twisted the pin, and tossed it uphill. A burst of thick gray smoke erupted, curling into the moonlight. The team shifted positions, retreating behind an outcrop. Ranger pressed against Jack's leg, chest heaving. They waited. Seconds stretched like minutes. The snipers didn't fire again. Only the wind moved, whispering across the stones. "They're testing us," Graves muttered. "Seeing if we'll run." Jack's mind raced. The terrain, the angle of the shots, the timing, it was all too deliberate. "No," he said quietly. "They're moving to flank." He turned to Cole. "We're not staying here. We head west, cut through the ravine. They won't expect it." Cole gave a sharp nod. "You're the boss." They moved fast, low, using the terrain as cover. Ranger stayed close, alert, but silent now. The ravine ahead was narrow, shadowed by high cliffs on either side. It felt wrong, too quiet, too still. Jack's gut twisted. Then a faint metallic click. Jack froze. Ranger's hackles rose instantly. Cole's eyes widened, and then the explosion came. A thunderous blast tore through the ravine, throwing sand and debris into the air. The shock wave slammed Jack backward, ears ringing. Ranger barked wildly, scrambling to his handler's side. Smoke filled the air, acrid and choking. "Graves!" Jack shouted. No response. He crawled through the haze, coughing, searching. Navarro's silhouette appeared, dazed but alive. Cole was down, half buried under rocks, his leg twisted unnaturally. Jack's heart pounded. "Cole, talk to me!" The sergeant groaned, blood staining the sand. "I'm here. Didn't see it. Tripwire." His voice cracked with pain but steadied. go. Finish it." Jack hesitated, then squeezed his shoulder. "I'll come back for you." Ranger stood beside him, panting, eyes bright even through the smoke. Jack wiped blood from his cheek, gaze lifting toward the ridge that loomed darker than ever. Somewhere up there, those snipers waited, patient and unseen. He whispered, "They think we're broken. Let's prove them wrong." Ranger barked once, short, sharp, like a promise, and together, limping through the smoke and dust, man and dog vanished deeper into the ravine, toward the enemy's den, where silence had teeth. Smoke hung low in the ravine like a wounded animal refusing to die. The blast had torn the night apart, but the silence that followed was worse, thick, deafening, alive. Lieutenant Jack Turner crouched behind a jagged boulder, chest burning, every breath tasting of ash and blood. His ears still rang from the explosion, and the sand beneath him trembled faintly as if the earth itself remembered the violence. Ranger pressed close to his leg, tail down, eyes glowing amber in the dim light of the stars. Jack forced himself to focus. The ringing faded enough for him to hear the faint groan of Sergeant Evan Cole somewhere behind him. Cole was alive, but pinned. Jack turned toward Corporal Ben Navarro, whose face was smeared with dust and streaks of blood. The young man's lips trembled, but his hand stayed steady on the rifle. Fear and discipline fought inside him, and both were losing. "Cole's hit bad," Navarro whispered hoarsely. "I know," Jack replied, checking the slope ahead. "We'll get him out, but not yet." Ranger's ears perked. He stared up toward the ridge, body rigid, nostrils flaring. Jack followed his gaze and saw faint flickers, movement against the stars. 2, maybe 3 shadows sliding across the rocks, watching. "They're repositioning," Jack muttered. "They want us to move first." Graves' voice crackled faintly through the radio, weak but alive. "Turner, you still breathing?" "Barely," Jack answered. "Cole's down. Navarro and I are mobile. We're being boxed in." "Copy that. Command lost our drone feed. You're on your own till sunrise." Jack smirked grimly. "Wouldn't have it any other way." He cut the transmission and turned to Navarro. "We're not going up. We're going through." The younger man frowned. "Through? That's a rock wall." "Not if there's a tunnel." Jack's gray eyes narrowed. "Snipers like these don't camp on open stone. They've got routes, maybe storage holes. We find it, we find 'em." Ranger suddenly moved ahead, nose to the ground, tail straight like a compass needle. He stopped near a crevice half hidden by debris, growling softly. Jack crawled forward, brushed away the sand, and felt cold air drift from below. "There," he whispered. They worked quickly. Navarro cleared the opening while Jack pulled Cole closer, dragging him inch by inch. The sergeant's face was pale beneath the grime. "Don't waste time on me," he rasped. Jack shook his head. "You're coming, even if I have to carry you." Cole tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "You always were a stubborn bastard." Jack smiled faintly. "Takes one to know one." With Navarro's help, they slid Cole into the narrow passage. Ranger entered first, leading them into the dark. The air inside was cooler, heavy with the smell of stone and oil. The tunnel sloped downward, curving like a serpent's spine beneath the ridge. Jack switched on his red light, dim, cautious, and the walls came alive with shadows. Halfway in, Ranger froze again. Jack raised a fist, signaling halt. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a wider chamber lit by faint orange glows, small oil lamps burning low. Crates lined the walls, ammunition, food, medical kits, and scattered across the ground, spent shell casings, sniper positions. Jack's jaw tightened. This is their nest." Navarro exhaled. "We found them." "Not yet," Jack said. "They're close. Too close." A sudden sound. A boot scraping rock. Then another. Ranger growled low, body tense. From the shadows emerged a figure. Tall, lean, wrapped in a desert shawl, an old AK slung low across his back. His beard was short, streaked with gray, and his eyes were sharp, intelligent. This was no local militia fighter. He moved with precision, the quiet grace of a trained soldier. Jack's instinct screamed. "Down!" he hissed. The man fired, short, controlled bursts. Bullets sparked against the tunnel walls. Jack rolled aside, firing back. Navarro ducked behind a crate, returning fire. Ranger lunged forward, teeth bared, forcing the attacker to retreat into the deeper chamber. Jack advanced slowly, pressing against the wall. He saw another movement. A second shooter crouched near a makeshift radio station. Jack fired once, clean and silent. The man fell. "Navarro, left side!" The corporal moved, agile despite the exhaustion, covering Jack's flank. Ranger darted ahead, barking once. A warning. Jack saw why. A wire glinted faintly under the lamplight, stretched across the floor. Tripwire. He stopped Navarro just in time. "Don't move!" He crouched, cutting the line carefully. Whoever had built this had known their craft. Tight trigger, hidden under sand. He disarmed it, then exhaled slowly. Cole groaned behind them. "You two finish your dance?" Jack managed a tight grin. "Almost." They secured the chamber, but Jack's mind was already running ahead. The radio set, they could trace the signal. Whoever commanded these snipers wasn't far. He approached the equipment, wiping dust off the screen. The device hummed faintly, still active. Then a new voice crackled through, low and cold, speaking in accented English. "You've come far, Lieutenant Turner, but tell me, how long can one man keep walking into death before it becomes home?" Jack froze. His finger hovered over the transmit key. "Who is this?" A short chuckle. "Someone who's been waiting for you." Static followed, then silence. Navarro looked up, uneasy. "Sir, who the hell was that?" Jack's expression hardened. "The reason we're here." He shut the radio off, pocketed the transmitter, and turned to Cole. "We're moving out, now." Cole groaned. "You think they're done?" Jack shook his head. "No, this was a message." As they prepared to leave, Ranger suddenly barked sharply, spinning toward the tunnel entrance. Jack raised his rifle. From the far end, faint lights flickered, flashlights moving fast, voices echoed in a foreign tongue. Reinforcements. "They're coming," Navarro whispered. Jack's mind raced. They couldn't fight in the tunnel, not with Cole injured. They needed an exit. His eyes swept the chamber until he spotted a narrow fissure in the rock wall, half concealed by a crate. Air moved through it. Fresh air. "This way," he ordered. They slipped through the gap one by one, Ranger first, Jack last. The passage was narrow, forcing them to crawl on elbows. Behind them, the tunnel erupted in gunfire. Bullets shattered rock and lamps, plunging the world into total darkness. Jack kept crawling, his heart pounding in rhythm with Ranger's breathing. The air grew colder, the ground steeper. Finally, they spilled out onto the ridge, high above the valley, the horizon beginning to pale with dawn. The first light touched the mountains, casting everything in hues of silver and blood. Navarro collapsed beside him, panting. "We made it." Jack stared toward the far ridge where the enemy had been. Smoke curled lazily from unseen fires. "No," he said quietly. "We just woke them up." Ranger whined, nudging his leg. Jack looked down, his fingers brushing the dog's fur. Then he turned to the valley below, where dawn met shadow. In the distance, faint through the rising wind, a helicopter's sound cut across the sky. But Jack's gut twisted. That wasn't an evac. It was coming from the enemy's side. He whispered to himself, almost a prayer, "They're bringing someone in." And for the first time that night, fear wasn't for himself, but for what was coming next. The first rays of dawn burned away the desert haze, turning the jagged ridges into molten gold. The wind howled across the cliffs, whipping dust into Jack Turner's face as he crouched beside a rock outcrop. His hands were still trembling from adrenaline, his knuckles raw from crawling through the tunnel. Ranger sat beside him, fur streaked with soot, chest rising and falling fast. Behind them, Navarro tried to stabilize Sergeant Cole, whose face had turned ghostly pale. The bleeding from his leg hadn't stopped, despite the tight tourniquet. Jack's eyes flicked to the horizon. The sound of rotor blades grew louder. The helicopter wasn't American. It was darker, smaller, and moved with the precision of a machine that didn't fear being seen. He could spot the insignia through the morning light, black triangles, unmarked, but familiar to anyone who had worked deep black ops. "Private contractors," Jack muttered, bitterness creeping into his voice. From the ridge's shadow emerged a figure, slim, calm, purposeful. Dr. Elias Rourke stepped into the sunlight, his white field coat flapping in the wind. He was tall, late 40s, with gray in temples and narrow, piercing eyes behind thin glasses. His skin was pale against the desert light, his movements deliberate, elegant even. Once, years ago, Rourke had been a military strategist, a psychological warfare specialist. But after his dismissal from the Department of Defense for unethical experimentation, he vanished, only to resurface as the ghost behind a network of mercenary snipers in war zones no one wanted to admit existed. Jack recognized him instantly, and his stomach turned. Rourke had been his father's commanding officer back in Iraq, a man whose experiments on human adaptability under stress had nearly killed half a platoon. The sight of him now made the air feel colder. "Lieutenant Turner," Rourke called out, his voice steady, carried easily on the wind. "You've grown since your father's funeral. I see his temper still burns in you." Jack stood, rifle raised. "You have 5 seconds to walk away." Rourke smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Always the soldier, never the thinker. You were predictable even then. Ranger growled, teeth bared. The helicopter settled behind Rourke, kicking up clouds of dust. 2 armed men stepped out, mercenaries, their faces hidden behind desert scarves and mirrored goggles. Both carried suppressed carbines, their postures sharp, professional. Jack noted their movement. Ex-special forces, maybe European. Navarro whispered from behind, "Sir, we're outgunned. We can't take them head on." "I know," Jack said softly. "That's why we won't." He signaled Ranger with a subtle hand gesture. The dog lowered his stance, muscles coiled. Rourke kept talking, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "I warned your father once that empathy would kill him. Now it's your turn to learn that lesson. Tell me, Jack, how does it feel to inherit a dead man's mistakes?" Jack's pulse hammered in his throat. He aimed, but didn't fire. "You're the mistake he tried to fix." Rourke's eyes glimmered. "You have no idea what we were working on, do you? What he died protecting." "Enough to know you use people like test subjects." "Subjects?" Rourke chuckled softly. "No, Lieutenant. We were building survivors. Your father volunteered first. That's why he brought you to Quantico's training field as a boy, to watch what resilience looks like." Jack's breath caught. Fragments of memory flashed, his father coughing blood after long nights at the base, the hush between the doctor's murmurs, the orders never to speak about it. "You're lying," he said, but his voice cracked. "Am I?" Rourke asked gently, almost pitying. "Your father was the blueprint, Jack, and you—" He gestured toward him. "You're the result." Before Jack could respond, Ranger barked sharply, "The signal!" 2 shots cracked in unison. Navarro's bullet dropped one of Rourke's mercenaries instantly. Jack pivoted, firing 3 controlled bursts, hitting the second man's shoulder and forcing him to dive behind cover. Rourke didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly turned and began walking toward the helicopter. "You always let emotion dictate your aim," he said over his shoulder. "That's your flaw." Jack advanced, gun trained on him, but another volley of shots rained down from the ridge. Snipers, multiple. Dust burst around his boots. He dove behind a boulder, dragging Navarro and Cole down. Ranger barked furiously, ears flat. "We're surrounded!" Navarro shouted. "Smoke grenades, now!" Jack yelled. Navarro yanked a pin and threw. The smoke burst wide, white plumes masking their position. Jack grabbed Cole, hoisting him over his shoulder, and they retreated down the opposite slope. Rourke's laughter echoed faintly through the haze. "You can't outrun your own design, Lieutenant." They stumbled down the rocks, half sliding, half falling. Ranger darted ahead, clearing the path. Behind them, the helicopter lifted off, vanishing into the rising sun. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it began. The silence returned, broken only by Cole's ragged breathing and the wind sighing through the cliffs. When they finally reached a flat clearing, Navarro collapsed, coughing hard. "Sir, what the hell was that?" Jack didn't answer at first. He stared at the trail of smoke rising from the ridge. "That was the man who made my father's war, and maybe mine too." Cole groaned faintly. "You saying this is personal now?" Jack looked down at him, eyes cold. "It always was." They built a small shelter under a broken ridge. Ranger lay near the entrance, ears twitching at every sound. Jack sat beside the wounded sergeant, wrapping fresh gauze around the leg. The sun was climbing fast now, and the heat was relentless. Sweat dripped from his brow as he tied the last knot. Navarro rummaged through their pack, pulling out a battered water canteen. "We're low," he said. "If we don't move soon, we'll cook out here." Jack nodded absently, lost in thought. The memory of Rourke's words gnawed at him like a slow poison. Your father was the blueprint. What had he meant? Ranger nudged his arm softly, as if sensing his turmoil. Jack looked down at the dog's trusting eyes and managed a faint smile. "Guess it's just us again, buddy." Navarro looked up suddenly. "Sir, do you hear that?" Jack froze. It wasn't gunfire. It was a faint, rhythmic beeping coming from Cole's vest pocket. He reached for it, pulled out a small device the size of a lighter, blinking red. Navarro's eyes widened. "Tracker." Jack's blood ran cold. Rourke's men planted it on him. He threw it as far as he could. The explosion hit seconds later, a concussive blast that threw them all to the ground. Ranger yelped, and Jack covered his head, ears ringing. When the dust cleared, the device was gone, but so was their cover. In the distance, across the burning sand, a convoy of black vehicles appeared, shimmering in the heat haze. Rourke's voice echoed again, this time through their radio. calm and almost tender. "Don't run, Jack. I'm sending someone you'll want to meet." Jack raised his eyes, squinting at the horizon. From the lead vehicle, a tall figure stepped out, silhouette against the sunlight, familiar, impossible. For a long moment, Jack forgot how to breathe. He whispered, voice breaking, "It can't be." Ranger growled low, sensing the fear before Jack could name it. And as the wind swept the sand around them, the figure began walking closer, slowly, deliberately, toward the son of the man he'd once served beside. The desert trembled beneath the hum of engines. Dust swirled in spirals as the black convoy drew closer, its mirrored windows reflecting the ruthless morning sun. Jack Turner stood frozen, rifle half raised, sweat tracing lines down the dirt on his face. Ranger stood in front of him, growling, ears low and eyes fixed on the lead vehicle. Navarro helped Cole sit upright against a boulder, both men battered, their faces streaked with exhaustion. The air smelled of burning oil and iron. The first door opened with a hiss. A figure stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing desert fatigues faded by time. His beard was thick, peppered with gray, his eyes sharp and green, carried something between guilt and disbelief. Jack's heart stopped. "Captain Michael Turner," Navarro whispered in shock. "That's my father," Jack finished, his voice barely more than air. For a heartbeat, time ceased to exist. The man who died in Iraq 15 years ago, whose grave Jack had visited every year, whose medals hung in his mother's living room, was walking toward him. The same gait, the same scar under his left eye, the same calm gravity in every motion. Michael Turner stopped 20 feet away, lowering his weapon. "Jack," he said softly, his voice deep, familiar, "you shouldn't have come here." Jack's throat constricted. "You're supposed to be dead." "I was," his father replied simply, "until Rourke decided I was worth saving." The words hit harder than any bullet. Ranger barked sharply, breaking the silence. Michael's gaze flicked toward the dog, and something like sorrow crossed his face. "Still got his father's eyes," he murmured. "Strong animal." Jack's grip tightened on his rifle. "What did he do to you?" Rourke's voice carried over the wind as he emerged from behind the vehicles, coat whipping like a banner. "He didn't die, Lieutenant. He was reborn. The program succeeded at least once." He smiled as he gestured toward Michael. "Your father was the prototype. You, the refinement." "Stop," Jack growled, stepping forward. "You turned him into this." Michael's face twisted with conflict. "It wasn't like that, son. I volunteered. I believed we were making soldiers who could survive anything." "You believed him?" Jack shouted, pointing his rifle at Rourke. "He's a butcher in a lab coat." Rourke's expression didn't change. "Your father understood that survival requires sacrifice. You wouldn't be standing here if not for him." The statement made Jack's vision blur. For years, he'd carried the ghost of his father's honor like a torch. Now it flickered, tainted by betrayal. "Then what am I, huh?" he said, voice shaking. "Another experiment?" Michael stepped forward. "You're my son." Jack shook his head violently. "You're a lie in a dead man's skin." Rourke's calm cracked slightly. "You should be grateful. Lieutenant, we built you to endure, to lead, to win. You are the proof that humanity can evolve." "I didn't ask to be your proof," Jack spat. Navarro whispered behind him, "Sir, we can't win this fight." Jack didn't respond. He watched his father, waiting for the man he once knew to say something, anything that made sense. Michael finally spoke, voice rough with regret. "Rourke's trying to restart the project. You have to stop him." Rourke's head turned sharply. "Michael." But Michael ignored him. "He's got data caches buried here. Genetic templates, research logs, everything. Destroy them, and this ends." Jack frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I couldn't stop him before," Michael said quietly. "Don't make my mistake." Before Jack could answer, one of Rourke's mercenaries raised his weapon. Ranger barked and lunged forward, intercepting the shot. The bullet struck the ground inches from Jack's boot. Jack fired back instantly, dropping the shooter. Chaos exploded. Navarro pulled Cole behind cover as automatic gunfire tore through the air. "Ranger, flank left!" Jack shouted. The German shepherd sprinted low through the dust, weaving between rocks. Jack advanced toward Rourke, each step fueled by rage and disbelief. Rourke moved back toward his vehicle, shouting commands in another language. Michael grabbed Jack's shoulder. "Don't! He's rigged the place!" "I'm done running!" Jack roared. Rourke laughed as he climbed into the helicopter. "You can't kill an idea, Jack," Jack fired. But too late. The chopper lifted off, blades cutting the sky. Ranger bounded after it, barking furiously. Jack lowered his rifle, chest heaving, watching the man vanish into the dawn. Then he turned to his father. "Where are the caches?" Michael pointed toward the ridge behind them. "South face under the comms tower. There's a fail-safe charge inside the bunker." "Then we end it," Jack said. They moved quickly. Navarro supported Cole, while Jack and Michael led the way. Ranger scouted ahead, his paws kicking up small clouds of dust. The comms tower loomed the distance like a skeleton against the sky. Beneath it, half buried in sand, stood an iron door marked with faded letters, Project Helios. Michael entered a code on the keypad, his hand steady despite everything. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dim corridor lined with old monitors and metal crates. The air inside was cold, metallic, dead. Ranger growled softly. Jack followed the sound to a row of glass cylinders filled with murky fluid. Inside, each floated human figures, half-formed, their faces eerily familiar. Navarro whispered, "Dear God." Jack's voice was low, trembling. He wasn't bluffing. Michael stepped beside him, eyes hollow. "This is what I became part of. It started with soldiers, but he moved on to civilians. Children." Jack swallowed hard, fury giving way to grief. "Then let's bury it." They found the detonator near the control console. Michael examined the wiring, his expression grim. "It's manual. Someone has to stay to trigger it." Jack froze. "No, we do this together." Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have to live, son. Make it mean something." "Don't." But Michael was already moving. He pushed Jack back toward the door and sealed it behind him. Through the reinforced glass, Jack saw his father's faint smile. "For once," Michael said through the comm, "listen to your old man." Jack pounded the door. "Dad!" Michael pressed the switch. Light filled the corridor. The explosion roared, tearing through the ridge, sending fire and debris into the sky. Jack was thrown to the ground, sand and smoke swallowing him whole. When the dust settled, there was nothing left but silence. The tower was gone. The bunker, a crater. Ranger limped toward Jack, fur singed, eyes bright with loyalty. Navarro helped him to his feet. The horizon blazed with sunrise, turning the desert gold again. Jack whispered, voice hoarse, "He stopped it." Navarro nodded. "He saved us?" Jack looked down at Ranger, who leaned against his leg. "No," he said softly. "He saved everyone." They began the long walk back toward the valley. their silhouettes stretched against the morning light. Behind them, the wind erased their footprints, like the desert itself wanted to forget the sins buried beneath it. But as they walked, a faint, distorted voice crackled through Jack's broken radio. Rourke's. "Did you really think I kept only one facility?" Jack's grip tightened on the radio, the desert wind rising once more. Ranger barked once, low and wary, as if sensing that the war wasn't over. And in the distance, where the sun met the sand, another shadow moved. In the end, when the fire faded and the dawn rose over the broken desert, it wasn't war or vengeance that saved them. It was grace. Jack Turner didn't walk out of that valley as a hero. He walked out as a man who had seen proof that miracles still exist. Not the kind that shatter mountains or part the seas, but the quiet kind. A father's final act of love, a loyal dog who never gave up, the sunrise that still comes after every night of loss. In that silence, Jack finally understood God doesn't always stop the storms. Sometimes He walks through them with us. Sometimes His greatest miracle is giving us the strength to keep standing when everything else falls. So if you're watching this right now, remember, no battle in your life is wasted when it teaches you to love deeper, forgive faster, and believe again. Let this story remind you that redemption is real, that hope is holy, and that miracles still move among the ashes. May God bless you and your family with courage, peace, and faith, wherever you are tonight.